So if we start just with a little bit of quiet sitting, just to arrive. Okay. So, we look a little bit now at Garab Dorje's second point, which is his encouragement is that it's important to become clear, or to not remain in doubt, or not to go under the power of different possibilities. This means that the more we open and have some experience of a state which is not constructed out of thoughts or feelings or sensations, the more possibility we have of not relying on the sequence of thoughts, feelings, and sensations as the basis of our identity. So, to not remain in doubt is to recognize that the content of our mind is a luminous radiance, a ceaseless flow, which has an energetic function, but doesn't establish anything in truth. Whatever you say about yourself, whatever you believe about yourself, is a movement or a gesture. It's not establishing anything as true. Now, we live as human beings in a world of conversation. We're always talking about something. We have many, many stories. And one of the functions of these stories is to create a sense of predictable identity, to give an account of something. In the realm of psychotherapy, there's a big stress on the dialogic, the idea of two people speaking together with a mutual impact and the transformations that can occur from that. You say something to me that impacts me, I'm slightly tilted, and then I respond to you, and my words impact you, and you're slightly tilted. And so on. We have this kind of interactive movement. However, normally speaking, as that occurs, we're also reviewing it, we're processing it in terms of an ongoing feedback about how am I, does this make sense, is this what I like, constantly rejigging things in terms of our existing framework. From the point of view of Dzogchen, that's very dangerous, because the more we believe in the truth of what we say, and the more we rely on cognitions, on thoughts, and storylines to create meaning, the meaning that we rely on is always relative and contextual. And so something that appears true at one time in our life doesn't appear true later. And this is something really to be shocked by. To be shocked by our own commitment. That we easily commit our lives to things which later all we can say is, well, it seemed a good idea at the time. That was what I was into then. But what does it mean to get into something? You know, as if we are some little snail crawling around looking for a shell to inhabit. And we live in that shell, and then it gets a bit small, so we crawl out again, hoping there's no crows around, and find another shell, and then another shell. People often nowadays have serial relationships that are like that, each time hoping for some better enclosure to keep them safe. What we were starting to look at yesterday is that awareness in being naked and raw needs no covering. It doesn't need any shell around it. The ego, being a very fragile and you could say false structure, that is to say, a structure that pretends to be stable when it's not, pretends to have an inherent self-nature when it doesn't have that, that ego is always looking for some kind of cover and shelter. And so we make use of other people to reassure us that we're doing okay. But from the Dzogchen, the central question is, who is the one who needs to be reassured that they're doing okay? Who is the one who is anxious? And why should we trust other people? Trusting other people means to believe that their story gives us an accurate account about ourselves. Now, in the Dharma it says that our real nature is macho tral. Macho means it's not artificial, it can't be contained by any kind of mental confectionery, it's not something elaborated through thought. Tral means it's ungraspable, it's not a relative thing built up by placing it next to other things, it's not part of a pattern. It's also said that this nature is masam jurmi, it's beyond any possibility of speaking or describing. Now, if that is our nature, what does it mean when someone says, "Oh, you're doing okay"? What is that? Who's doing okay? They're talking to something, they're talking to some aspect of us, but it's not our real nature. In fact, what they're saying is that the covering over your real nature is of very good quality, madam. I can see you're a very discerning customer. I've never seen such quality before. But could I perhaps suggest that this time we put a little gold trim around it? I think that would improve you. And that's what we do all the time. We help each other to improve the stories we wrap around ourselves. And on one level, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the playful movement of energy. And it's one of the ways in which we connect with people. And one possibility of connecting with people is to help them to realize the difference between clothes and being naked. The mind itself is naked. There's nothing shameful in nakedness. Clothes are a kind of ornamentation. When you see these pictures of, say, someone like Padmasambhava or Vajrasattva, these beings carry many, many different ornaments. These ornaments all have some explanation to them. That is to say, they are symbols of particular kinds of qualities. If we imagined that all our speech acts were simply ways of manifesting qualities, that's all they are. They're ways of gesturing out into the world, of displaying movements or evanescent, transient, ungraspable revelations. That's all they are. They don't establish anything in truth. So, clothes and nakedness are not the same thing. We don't need clothes, therefore we can enjoy clothes. If you enjoy your clothes, then you perhaps need to think, well, what is the occasion that I'm being invited into? How shall I dress? That means being aware of the situation, being aware of other people, and adorning oneself suitably for that occasion. It means that clothing is now not self-protective, but is relational. So when we speak to other people, what are we trying to say? Why are we saying what we say? If we're telling stories about our lives or so on, why are we doing that? What is the purpose? Are we trying to hook some approval back, some reassurance that we're okay, that we're normal, that we're lovable, that we're acceptable? That's fair enough. But we have to know that's a very self-referential behavior. That is the enclosure of the anxious self in a temporary carapace, a temporary covering. If our speech act is connected towards the other with an invitation to play, that is to say, not to take things so seriously, so that some movement is possible, and we start to enjoy the movement, not as a way of defending territory or asserting a position, but just of seeing how energy moves all the time, then it's very different. Then it's a gift. It's something moving out of us towards the other. And the more we give these gifts, the more we find there is a cornucopia inside us. That the heart is indefatigable. It never gets tired. It never gets exhausted. There's always more that can be done. But when we get into a defensive position, when we feel maybe worried or anxious or confused, and we feel life is very hard, then there's not much in our little purse. So we have to kind of watch our coins very carefully and think, are you going to take too much? Or, what's coming back to me? And it becomes much more a kind of trade-off. So the second point of Garab Dorje is very, very important. Essentially he's saying, don't rely on the temporary contents of your experience to point to your true identity. If you recall from yesterday, we were looking at non-duality. Non-duality here means the content is there, it's not wrong or bad, it's not obscuring the real nature, but if you don't see the real nature directly, you won't know what the content is, as with the mirror. You never see the mirror directly, but you can have a direct experience of the mirror when you wake up to the fact that what you see in it is simply a reflection. This is not remaining in doubt, not remaining in confusion. It means don't rely on ideas, don't rely on concepts. You can read Dharma books for a long, long time, and nowadays there are so many Dharma books, there's no end to them. There are endless numbers of courses and trainings and so on that you can do. You can accumulate historical knowledge about lineages, you can develop knowledge about how to do pujas and so on. All of these things are useful if you understand what they are, which is to say that these are forms of energetic expression. In particular, tantric practice is a form of disciplining energy, keeping it moving in the right way, so that you learn to ring a bell at the right time, to make the mudras in the right way. And this is more controlled and also more at ease from normal interactive behavior. Because once you know how to do the ritual, you relax into it and it flows from the beginning to the end. But it is not, in most of its performance, it's not necessarily keeping you in a state of open awareness, because you can easily fall into the words. We have to practice with some kind of clarity. Every practice, like doing prostrations, saying prayers, preparing butter lamps and so on, all of these have a function, and it's really important to know what function it has. These are helpful functions, but they're helpful within a relative domain. It's important to do that, because if our ordinary life is very, very disturbed, the real practice of deep meditation will be difficult. You can study the basic vows of the Theravadan or the Hinayana groupings, the vows of renunciation. You don't necessarily have to adopt these, but if you see the rationale, then we see that discipline is very important. You cannot say yes if you cannot say no. Being able to say no means that your yes is fully a yes. Because if you always have to say yes, if you're always placatory, trying to please people, tilted towards them, what does your yes mean? It's just something you do. it's not a specific yes into this situation. You're not saying to this person, yes, I see you, I really will help you. It's not heart to heart, it's just the general tilt of your life. And in order to say yes to one person, you have to be able to say no to someone else. And that means being aware that on the relative level, our resources are limited. So on one level, the heart is infinite, there's infinite energy, and on another level, time is not unlimited. We only have so much time, we only have so much money, we only have so much free time. What are we going to use it for? There are many, many different kinds of dharma. How will we decide? Well, that involves being clear, what is the function of this practice, and what is my structure at the moment? What ails me? What troubles me? What diminishes me? What limits me? The more you understand yourself, then the more you can use dharma as a medicine. If you don't know how to diagnose your own condition, and you just think, well, I don't feel very well, and you go to the medicine cabinet and you have one of each of the pills that's there, that's a very broad spectrum approach, and it may find you puking half an hour later. What you have to do is know the difference. If you have a headache, what kind of headache is this? Should I just sit quietly in a dark room for a while? Then it lifts. Should I go out and get some fresh air? What's the matter? If we don't learn to observe ourselves and start to see the lies that we tell ourselves, then how will we be able to diagnose what's wrong with us? So, for example, you may have a habit of prevarication, of avoidance. It's not an uncommon human faculty. Something is required to be done, and you put it off. And the reasons that you put it off often are quite valid. You don't feel well, or there's something else that has to be done, or it's not the right day, or you might get into astrology and find some planetary justification. There are many ways of prevaricating. You have to know what that is. What are you doing to yourself when you put something on? What's inside that? It may be something as primitive as a little thing that says, I don't have to. Why should I? It may be something really quite regressed and early in your life. And if it grabs you in relation to Dharma practice, that's really quite tragic. Because you don't do the practice you could do today, and then tomorrow life is very busy, and so you don't do tomorrow's practice either. And at the end of the week you think, well, I'll put aside a lot of time, but then something else happens. So in order to do what we have to do, we have to say no. And that's one of the reasons that we do the practice we began with this morning. Shamatha is based on saying no. We say yes to the breath, or yes to the external object, and because of that we say no to everything else. And for that reason it's a very, very important practice. On one level it's very simple, but it's very hard. Because actually, we say yes to everything. We're very easy. We're infinitely seducible by any bit of nonsense that goes by. If you sit with small children at this time of the year, especially on a Saturday morning with the children's programs, lots of adverts. Sometimes the adverts run 5-10 minutes. All the things getting ready for Christmas. Any kind of plastic tat imaginable. And each thing that comes up, the child will say, I need that, I want that, that's for me, I need 2 of these. We are the same. We sit into meditation, focusing on the breath. Some thought comes, What is that? That is a sign of having no clarity, of having no discrimination. Basically, there is a dog. The dog has a tail. 2 possibilities. The dog wags the tail wags the dog. These are the only possibilities. Either your clarity makes decisions about movement into the world, and then you start wagging, you start coming energetically into the world. Or you become taken up by the world in a reactivity, and the movement of your tail as you get caught in the world sets the whole of you in movement. And you're just reacting to what's going on. That's the really central thing. Where do we stand? Which is why yesterday we were looking at what does the mind rest on? As long as your experience is that the root of your identity is in the thoughts, feelings, sensations that arise, you are at the mercy of situations. You are endlessly reactive. That's the meaning of samsara. When you realize this open state, when you awaken to it, when it becomes true and living for you, you will still be impacted by the world, but there's a clarity between your nakedness and your clothes. Your reaction is a kind of clothing. Somebody phones you and tells you some sad news, and immediately you're garbed in compassion, pity, empathy. Somebody tries to cheat you in a shop, and immediately you're garbed in indignation. Someone shows you a little baby, and immediately your face is softened. You can be however the situation demands, but each of these is the flow of energy. It is not, this is what I do. It is the feedback loop of self-referencing, of self-reflexivity is dissolved. Because as long as we're saying, I am the one who does this, we remain on the samsara side. When the activity arises spontaneously with no feedback loop, this is the nirvana side. It's just that simple. Because every time you have a feedback loop, I did it, the next thing you have is a performance review. Well, how did I do it? Was it good enough? Then you start anxiously scanning and building up a composite picture of how I stand in relation to other people. This is called the relative situation. It is not free by definition. Again, that doesn't mean that in Dzogchen we should be indifferent to the impact of our lives on the situation. But energy moves with energy. If you're dancing with someone, you don't have to review how you're dancing. If you're present in your senses, if you're there in your skin, you will feel the movement of their body, and you will move with it even before it's arrived. That doesn't require any cognitive processing. You don't have to think about it. It's at this point that we can see what a thought is. Thought is called namtok. Nam means the form, and tokpa indicates a kind of understanding. So it's a namtok is a way of grasping a situation, of making sense of it, making a kind of a composite, defined sense of what something is. That is not really necessary a lot of the time in life. It's just not required. And when we sit inside these and build them up, there's endless work to do, because we're always having to correct the impression that we've made. You know, it's like if you're having an interesting conversation with someone, afterwards you might feel like, oh, I wish I'd said this. Because you can't say the whole story. You can never say the whole story. That's why our human existence is an infinite conversation. It just goes on and on. It goes on through culture. It goes on in families across generations. It goes on in notebooks people write, diaries, telephone conversations. There's no end to words. There's no end to thoughts. If you are in thoughts, identified with thoughts, imagining that thoughts tell you the answer to things, then we're in samsara. When we relax and we become aware of the thoughts, we see this is the spontaneous energy arising, and it does whatever it needs to do. So it's fundamentally about trust. Anxiety leads us into belt and braces. We want to have a double protection. We want to make sure that things won't go wrong. This is where discursive thought is very important, because it takes us around topics. We try to cover every base. We try to make sure nothing can go wrong. But actually, the world isn't like that. We touched yesterday on the political and economic situation. The world economy is beyond control. It is participative. People have to gesture into it and hope that the system takes off in a reasonable way. But it is much too complicated for control. And the problem with discursive thought is that it tries to establish clarity through ratiocination, through turning one thought on top of another, on top of another. And there is no end to that process, because there's always more to say. Somebody asks you, what do you think about this person? And you say something, and then after you think, well, there are 100 other things to say about that person. You can't sum someone up in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. All you can do is, if you meet someone, you get a sense of whether you have much of a connection, whether it's workable or not. That's all. But you can never give a true account of anyone. Biographies tend to get longer and longer. There's always more to say. The same with ourselves. There is no end to the account of ourselves, and that giving an account covers up the immediacy of the lived vitality of who we are. So again, it's not an either or. Both aspects are there. The openness, the unborn openness, and the ceaseless flow of energy. And these are inseparable. This is the meaning of this Yab Yum when you see this male and female deities joined together. The space and the movement, or the stillness and the movement, are inseparable. So the second point of Garab Dorje is continue in the spaciousness. If you remain in spaciousness, you won't get pulled into doubts. You won't get pulled into trying to make sense of it. Because the more you think about it, the less you will understand. The more you will know, but the less you will understand. The door to enlightenment lies through stupidity. Big stupid. Don't know nothing. Don't know nothing. St. John of the Cross writes of this in terms of the dark night of the soul. It means that after all the struggle, doing the work, going through whatever it is, the stages of the following the life of Christ, or the Lamrim progressive stages in Buddhism, whatever it would be, various ways of different Sufi paths, you get to a certain point where there's a chasm. And all that you know isn't enough to build a bridge across the chasm. You can see what's on the other side, but the only way to get there is to jump down into the chasm, to allow yourself just to be lost. In Buddhism, this is called emptiness. As it says in some of these traditions, you have to lose yourself to find yourself. That means whatever is our familiar frame of reference, whatever are the memories and thoughts and encouragements we have inside ourselves that hold us in place, we need to drop. And when we drop these, there's nothing. And when there's nothing, a new dawn comes. The sun comes up and we see the world differently. But as long as we are kind of spending all our money in having a private jet fly around the world to keep in touch with the sun and never let it get dark, that's what we live in. We live in a little box, keeping our lives lively and excited, hanging on to the fantasies of our existence. We have to let the night come. We have to say, I don't know. I can't do this. Who is the one who can't do it? That will only be revealed when the one who feels he can do it, should do it, is able to say, I can't do it. When you give up the ghost is there. And the ghost is this open, unborn Dharmakaya. Of course, you have to be ready to do that. Right?
I was going to ask that, if you have to kind of know yourself and unlearn yourself to then let go of yourself, to then
Mhm.
yourself. Because you just, what I heard was that you need to lose yourself to find yourself.
Mm.
I just wondered if you have to know yourself or cleanse
Yeah,
to then lose yourself, to know yourself.
that's right. Because you have to lose all of yourself. There's no point there being a little bit left. I mean, that tends to be what happens if we do this 3-hour practice, you know. Most of us gets a bit gone, but there's still some little bit. Maybe your ear is still there, or some pain in your foot. And then the whole picture builds around that. It's how to get rid of everything. And we don't need to do it by renunciation and putting it away. We just see, I have made the impersonal personal. Here we are on a Sunday morning, and I'm talking in English, and we've all learned English. English was around before any of us were born. English has a life of its own. We participate in the speaking of English, and we feel that we are speaking English. But actually, English is speaking us. The grammar rules of English speak through us. We create our sentences according to a grammar which is impersonal. Every time we speak, even when we speak from the heart to a close friend about what we feel about our life or our relationship or whatever it is, this is language speaking through us. It's something quite impersonal. You don't have your own words. If you had your own words, no one would understand you. Little children make their own words, and only the people who know them well can understand what they're saying. We speak a public language. Just seeing that, but it feels like me. These are my words. This is what I'm saying. But I'm saying it with public language. It's public language. Language speaks to language. Language moves. Language is a network that connects us all. Just as the internet, people feel they're using the internet. The internet's using you. You plug into a system which has its rules, and you learn these rules, and so you become the tail of that dog. You feel you're in charge, but actually you're only in charge if you obey its rules. If you cross its rules, it doesn't do what you want. This is actually how our world is. Recognizing everything belongs in the world. Our body belongs in the world. Our speech belongs in the world. And our mind also belongs in the world, because our thoughts are not so different from other people's thoughts. In the realm of psychotherapy, we spend a lot of time attending to the minutiae of individuals' lives. Exactly what it was like in someone's family growing up, exactly what they feel like when they go into work or they talk with a friend or whatever it would be. But in Buddhism, we are concerned with much more general things, with 5 poisons: stupidity, anger, desire, jealousy, pride. Everything that people experience can be put into these basic 5 categories, because what we have is variations on a theme. For us as individuals, the variation is exquisitely important, because it's our variation. But it's just a variation on a theme. Someone comes into the hospital and they tell their story, and you listen to the story, but if you want to enter the details on the computer, you have to have a diagnosis. If you don't have a diagnosis, computer will say, profile not complete, and will wipe out what you've put in. You have to have a diagnosis, because diagnosis is a box. Some people think things like the ICD-10, DSM-4, big diagnostic systems are an insult to the existential moment of how we are. But everything's in a box. Everything is part of a family. When you have a big tantric initiation, you find yourself in one of the 5 Buddha families. You have to be in one of these families, because they're only working with 5. I mean, there are 100 Buddha families, there are 1,000 Buddha families, there are many, many different systems, but somewhere or other, you will fit in. Fitting in means public, not private. We are human beings. We all fit into that. We're just human beings. British, get a British passport, American passport, whatever. You show that, one of us, or Why are you coming to this country? So it is. Where do you fit in? It's the same with the thoughts in our head. When you start to realize that this is public, this is just stuff that's arising. But who will I be if I'm not wrapping myself in this stuff? That's the central question. As long as you wrap yourself in the public and claim it to be private, you're in the position of the thief. And the punishment of that theft is called samsara. As long as you imagine you have a unique, special, personal existence, different from everyone else's, and worthy of infinite care or self-cherishing, you will have a lot of problems. When you recognize you're part of this ceaseless flow with other people, win some, lose some, sometimes it expands, sometimes it contracts, then it's not such a big deal. You expect, in seeing other people have tears, that some days you will cry. When you see that other people are sad, you think, oh yeah, I also will be sad. When you see that other people get lonely and desperate, you say, yeah, I will also get lonely and desperate. So when you get lonely and desperate, you think, oh, now I'm being lonely and desperate. Now I'm in Tesco's. The two are not necessarily the same, but often they go together. Waitrose is for happiness. So when to be in Tesco's is to be in a public domain. To be in your unhappiness is a public domain. Our sorrow is what? Somebody's died, somebody's left me, my hopes haven't been fulfilled, I'm sick. Anyone else have these? You know, we are much of a muchness. When we see that, we think, oh, this is impersonal. This is what happens in samsara. Taking things too personally is unhelpful. It doesn't mean that you're going to be annihilated, because the radiance of the Dharmakaya is completely vital and shining and spontaneous. But it's not self-referential in that way. And that's an absolute paradox, isn't it? That the more you stop obsessing about yourself, the more alive you are. The less you protect yourself and try to ensure a security for yourself, the more you're plugged into the environment around you, and therefore you feel the waves of the world passing through you, which is an amazing sensation. It's then not all up to you, which is one of the reasons why we have refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Many people get attracted in a somewhat narcissistic way to being lonely Dharma heroes, and they want to do it all by themselves. But actually, we need other people. All of us have gaps. All of us have needs. All of us have particular things we can't do. Therefore, we rely on other people. Some people find that very humiliating. They want to be totally autonomous. They want to be able to do everything for themselves. But this is ridiculous. They don't make their own shoes. They don't make their own jewelry. We're always reliant on other people, on farmers, on traders, on people who drive trains, and so on. Dependency as interdependency decenters the subject. We become part of the world. So in the energy system of Dzogchen, we talk of possibility of being completely open and translucent, like a radiant space through which everything passes. So in the meditation, thoughts and so on, memories, everything arises and passes through. Like clouds passing through the sky remains open. Then we have this main quality we were talking about of reflections in the mirror. Immediately everything is manifest to us. We come into this room and here we are. Everything is here. We don't need to make sense or work out where people are or what they're doing. They're immediately there, and we can respond into that. And the third aspect is compared to light coming in through a crystal and refracting out. It's the particularity of the moment in which we respond to different people in different ways. You can do that by a lot of thinking and planning, or you can do it just by being there with others. If you feel the quality of someone else's life, you'll know what to say to them. It's that simple. You don't have to construct something in an artificial way. And if you do that, then it's not that it's coming out of me, but it's in the matrix. So this is a relational matrix, which is not a dialogic. It's not caught up in speaking and organizing things in terms of reflective thought, but is determined by the immediacy of energetic connection. And this is very important. In fact, people who train as child psychotherapists, or anybody who's got kids, has got to learn to do that. You can't think too much with small children. You have to be there. You have to be in it, which means you can't be anxious. And you can't have the usual guardians of your self-love, your sense of identity. Because children want you to be silly. Children want you to forget yourself. And if you can do that, then you can relate to them. But they're not hiding somewhere in their head. They're just showing it. So being with children is a great blessing if you're practicing Dzogchen, because they won't give you anywhere to hide. And they're always saying, where are you? Where are you? And you have to be there before you know where you are. Because that's where they are. They don't know where they are. They're just there. And they're there in a very clear way. And there's something really important in that, which shows us how we have learned to be wary, how we have learned not to trust ourselves. Now, of course, you can't become like a child, because children run into the road and children get upset and have nightmares and can't calm themselves. Children have lots of difficulties, but they have a lot of spontaneity and freshness. And so what we're doing in Dzogchen is to have the freshness, the openness, the immediacy without the anxiety, so that the cognitive knowledge that we build up in our adult life is there. It's to hand. It's something useful when we need it. And if we don't need it, it's not there. So that our hands are always open and what we need is there, rather than being full of stuff or not having anything at all. This is the non-dual middle way. Everything you learn is incredibly useful, but you don't need to hold on to it. If you build a sense of self on the basis of knowledge, that becomes a problem. Which is why learning to drop your thoughts, drop your mind, drop your memories is a very important part. A great deal of Zen Buddhist practice is exactly about dropping, letting things fall away, letting go of constructs. So, again, very briefly, this second point of Garab Dorje. When we say being clear, it means not a clarity based on being able to give an account of something, but a clarity which informs the immediacy of all the choices you make. So, if, say for example, you smoked cigarettes, and now you don't smoke cigarettes. If you're very clear that you don't smoke, even if you smell some delicious gauloise or a cigar or something, you think, that smells nice, but it's nothing to do with you. You don't then think, oh God, I want a fag, I want a puff of that. When you had just given up smoking, you probably did feel that, because you were very close to smoking. Now, because you're clear that you don't smoke, You can be very close to smoking, but there's no frisson, there's no kind of vibration, because there's smoking and there's me. I don't smoke, but that's nice. So that buffer zone, or that separation, at first, when you're trying to stop something, has to be a big renunciation. So often if we're working with alcoholic patients, we'll say, well, what you need to do is to work out a way to walk home where you don't pass any off-license or any pub, so that there won't be any temptation. Set up all these sort of things. So you want maximum distance. The more we practice, this gap can be smaller and smaller. And the ultimate goal is to have a gap which is not a gap at all. Because when you think of the mirror and the reflection, there is no gap between the mirror and the reflection. The reflection is in the mirror, but when you turn the mirror, that reflection is immediately gone and a new reflection is there. In the same way, we can be completely in the world, of the world, not apart from it, and yet untouched, unconditioned, uncontaminated by it, unlimited by it. Now, in order to do that, the main thing is to go back again and again and do the practice as we were doing yesterday. Because the central point is, until we get some taste of that openness, until we can see the illusory nature of the thoughts and feelings that arise, even as we get caught up in them, if we can start to experience them as movements rather than as things, if we don't have that, we won't have any space to maneuver. But as soon as we get a sense of that space, oh, it's a bit different. And then you work with that. So that every moment of the day, we integrate all the experiences we have into this state of openness. So, for example, often if I'm teaching, I go to the place I'm going to in an aeroplane. Now, it's a very interesting thing to practice Dzogchen in an aeroplane, because what is this? In this tin box up in the sky, what is this experience? You have your safety belt around you, and you have to be safe. You can't get claustrophobic and open the door and jump out. You're trapped inside something. It is a very managed environment. There's a lot of security things which are invisible in airplanes now to be able to control situations. What is happening? Well, you can make sense of an airplane flight by thinking about it, or you can just relax and open and experience the movement of energy. What you have is colors, shapes, sounds. That's what you have. You then construe them, and you can construe them in a relaxed way or an anxious way. That construal is the work of your mind. You make of it what you will. Sometimes we get anxious. We can get anxious about colleagues at work. We can get anxious about noisy or difficult neighbors. We can get anxious about children, parents. We can get anxious about any damn thing. So, what is that anxiety? I am worried about that. I don't know what will happen. I wish it wasn't the way it was. It's not very complicated. The pathways of anxiety are very simple and straightforward. Subject is linked to object with a set of indeterminacy. What is the subject? What is the object? I don't like flying. Oh, I'm frightened that the plane might crash. Okay? You're frightened that the plane might crash. That's a thought. No, but I'm sure it will. Okay? If you believe that thought, then you can't get on a plane. That's true. These extreme examples are very helpful because we all have exactly these situations. If you look at your life in the course of a week, how many things do you avoid? Linking it with prevarication that we touched on earlier. How many ways in which we feel a situation will be very difficult. We become overwhelmed. It becomes intolerable, impossible. I couldn't do that. These are signs that you have merged yourself into a nexus, a grouping together of thoughts, feelings and sensations. And that definition of yourself, because it's small, will always be overwhelmed. Why wouldn't we be overwhelmed? If you live in a body, you should be frightened. There are hundreds of ways for the body to die and get sick. Having some awareness of that is helpful. It's very, very helpful. Anxiety is part of our condition. So, when anxiety arises, what does it tell us? We have to be careful. That's all. Be as careful as you can. Being careful means being present in your body, in your senses, whatever is happening. We can't control the situation. Imagining that it's very easy won't help. You can pray to Padmasambhava, you can imagine your Vajrakilaya, you can imagine all sorts of things, but this is a way of reassuring yourself. We have to remember that many great meditators got tortured to death by the Chinese. You know, one shouldn't be in fantasy land where somebody throws a torma and all the Chinese vanish. That's what you get in Chinese movies where people are doing qigong. Boom, boom, boom. It's not like that. Somebody gets you and they're breaking your fingers, tears come out your eyes. That's what happens. The human condition is very vulnerable. There are very bad people in this world. How to practice Dzogchen in that situation is very important. If you really understand yourself as energy, it's not so bad. Because then you're with the sensation of the cracking of your fingers. This is almost inconceivable for us to imagine. Because we live in a self-referential world. And this self-referential thing makes every situation critical and hyper-important. We are just like small children, and they fall over and they get upset and they want you to kiss it better. But if you kiss it better, they relax. They can't soothe themselves. You could say that all of the Buddha's teaching is an elaborate instruction on self-soothing. How to stay in your own skin without being overwhelmed, without fragmenting, so that in this skin, which is not this flesh skin, it's the skin of the Dharmakaya, which is infinite, any situation can be integrated, good and bad, right and wrong. But as long as we are saying, I only want good things and I don't want bad things, that is the ego's point of discrimination. So when Garab Dorje is saying, don't remain in doubt, be clear, he's pointing to this point that was described yesterday, that there is one ground and two paths. We're always at a crossroads. Either we exist as a small individual self in a world of objects, some of which we like, some of which we don't like, some help us, some harm us, and we do our best to manage it. Or we relax and we're open and we integrate whatever is arising, and in particular experience that everything that arises is the energy of our own mind. So in this room just now, each of you is in your own body, and there are other people. Where are these other people? Are they outside you or inside you? Where is your mind? If your mind is in your bone box, then everyone else is outside of you. If your mind is an open, unborn awareness, then you're aware of yourself and other people. As soon as you're here in yourself, everyone else is here. Where did they come from? I thought it was just me. Other people are always there. These other people are just as much you, as in your experience, as you are. You never just experience yourself. Maybe for a brief moment as you're falling asleep or waking up. But even then you've got the feeling of the pillow on your cheek and so on. The world is always with us. This is the non-duality of self and other. So this is the fundamental point. Observe subject and object arise together. Self and other arise together as reflections in the mirror. The one who is aware is the mirror itself. The one who appears is a reflection in the mirror. It is only a reflection. When we take this body as too solid, too substantial and real, and separate it off from others, it appears to be me, but it's immediately very vulnerable. When you experience yourself as just part of the general reflection, then these reflections move together. This is the second point of Garab Dorje. So maybe we do a little practice of the 3 R's as we did yesterday. So, sitting in a relaxed way, skeleton holding our weight, the gaze in the space in front of us, imagining a capital A is surrounded by a ball of rainbow light, and the same in our own heart. Recite the 3 R's and then relax in that state. So if we take a break now for about 20 minutes. Okay, so the third point from Garab Dorje is to continue in this way.
James?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Based on our practice before the break. It was something that came up as I was practicing. This question came up in my head and I couldn't get rid of it. It wouldn't dissolve. And I think this practice helps a lot with in sort of observational mode. It helps see what comes up. So in my day-to-day life, as situations emerge, it helps me a lot see things better. What I was going to ask was, what is the next bit? Was the intentionality, the intention, the action that then might follow from that. I don't know how the practice helps me with that, because the mode of the practice is very much around observation, seeing what comes up and then staying with it, but not around intention and action and what might happen. Now, whether that emerges from clarity, I don't know. You think it's just keep doing the practice and seeing what happens, or is there some other way of integrating into day-to-day life that helps you with the intentionality as well?
Well, the founding Buddha of the Dzogchen lineage, Kuntu Zangpo, the name means always good, or always already good. But we believe we're bad. And because we believe we're bad, we want to develop an intention to be good. Because if we didn't have an intention to be good, we would be bad. And this is the basic basis of a lot of our intention. That our intention is a way of manipulating the environment. Of course, if my intention is to get to the post office before it closes, then I need to not be distracted. And so on an ordinary level, meditation can help us with that. But that's in a sense is a situational intention, and that's simply a matter of awareness. Knowing when the post office is likely to close is just part of the field of experience. But if you mean a bigger intention, like what will I do with my life, or how will I raise my kids, or
just dealing with situations as they arise and knowing the right action, I suppose, in dealing with people. Because I think these things in the practice, it's easier in a way. As soon as you leave the practice and go into an interaction with somebody or something, that's where it becomes more difficult. You lose it a little bit. I do anyway. And
well, if our daily life is outside the practice, then indeed, of course, we will lose it. Because if we concretize another person in a substantial way, and we see ourselves in a substantial way, and we see there being a lot at stake in the interaction, then immediately we're in the domain of anxiety and control. Whereas if we stay in the practice, then what we encounter is shapes and forms and qualities of energy, and we can respond into that. Because actually, either things are already decided or they're not decided. And if they're not decided, it will become clear, and it will become clear as we participate. So you can have a slightly orienting intention, like, I don't want to cheat other people, or I don't want to exploit other people. But then, that's nice, but what does it mean? In a precise situation, how will you know what to do? Which rule book do you want to read? Karl Marx, Martin Luther. I mean, there are many, many, many rule books in this world about how to behave. You can follow any of these, as long as you know you're following a rule book. But actually, none of us know how to behave. What will I do? We have books of etiquette. If you do very well in your life and you get invited to go and meet the Queen, people will tell you how to walk towards the Queen and how to walk away from the Queen. That somehow it's rude to turn your back on the Queen, so you have to walk backwards. That's etiquette. A lot of life is etiquette. There's business etiquette. There's all kind of etiquette. If you have a child and the child is, 9, 10 years of age, and you're concerned about them getting into a good school, and you're not very happy with the teacher, what to do? One of my patients has this problem at the moment. The teacher the child has is shit, but she can't say to the teacher, you're shit, and she can't say to the headmistress, this teacher's shit, because she needs a good report on her child in order to get into a good secondary school. What to do? And life is full of these things. No rule book's going to tell you how to do that. And this is the problem with intentionality. You can develop a general Mahayana Buddhist intention, I want to help all sentient beings, and that's very broad spectrum. In terms of minute situations, what happens is we're constellated in a particular way by all sorts of factors. We might be irritable, we might not have slept, we might have some problem in the family, and you go into work and you're preoccupied with that, and you hit the situation and you're not very clear. So the essence of the practice is keep dissolving and relaxing and opening again and again. But in the Theravada, in the Mahayana, and the Tantric practice, intention is very clear. In Tantra, the intention is to maintain the presence of the deity at all times. Mahayana Buddhism, the intention is to maintain the Bodhisattva vow and the sense of emptiness. And Theravada Buddhism, it's to maintain your vows. In Dzogchen, the basic intention, if you like, is to remain in a state of integration. That's not an intention which will tell you precisely what to do in any circumstance, because actually nobody knows.
But the clarity just helps maintain spontaneity.
Yeah.
Helps to keep. If you can bring that into your day-to-day life, that gives you the spontaneity.
Yeah. When people operate in the realm of power and control, they will come up with millions of methods. For example, in Hasidic Judaism, they have prayers for everything, absolutely everything. In the same way, I was teaching in a Kajupa center recently, and in the toilet they have a special mantra to say, and there's one mantra for having a pee and one mantra for having a poo. So don't mix your mantras. You can have mantras for anything. They have mantras for making chang, for making beer in Tibet, to protect, the beer so it doesn't go sour. Once you get into a way of thinking, I can learn a special method to control a situation. You can endlessly come up with some new method. I remember once when I was in Bodh Gaya and I was learning Tibetan, I bought some Tibetan books and I bought them mainly on the basis that the letters were very big and clear, so I'd be able to work out what they were. And I showed this book to my teacher, and he said, "Oh yeah, this is a special method for finding lost sheep." That's it. So inside the domain of manipulating the world, there are many solutions, and many people do that. Many people go to lamas and ask them, "What should I do about this? How will I do that?" And they will come up with some reason, maybe good, maybe bad. That's part of their job. It's a socio-political economic function. But actually, who can tell you how to live? Everyone. Yeah. Everyone's willing to tell you what to do. But nobody really knows. In the end, you live in your skin and you carry your karma. And that's the lonely situation. Now, how do we deal with loneliness? One way is to link to other people and get lots of advice. And the other method, which would be the Dzogchen method, is to go into the state of the alone, completely infinite awareness. And from that, you find yourself responding. And that leads us into this third point of Garab Dorje, which is to continue in this state. Which means not to imagine that there's some better method. When we really see how things are, you don't need anything else. In many Tibetan books you will find, they say, the teaching here is the essence of the Madhyamika, it's the essence of Mahamudra, of Dzogchen. If you understand this, you don't need anything else. And the reason they said that is because there are many books in Tibet. Although many of the books were destroyed in the communist Chinese period, we in the West are producing many, many Dharma books now. There are tens of thousands of Buddhist books in English. There are lots of centers and there are lots of practices, and more practices will come and more lineages. What should we do? This is a central question. Life is very short. Many things seem to be interesting. How will I spend my time? From the point of view of Dzogchen, the most important thing is to stay relaxed and open. And whenever you find yourself being noted, being turned in on yourself, following after thoughts and not being present, return into the practice and integrate the situation rather than you compartmentalizing yourself and fitting in like a part of a jigsaw puzzle. But of course, that's not very bright and shiny, because you may have a tedious life. Your life may not be what you thought it would be when you were 20. Your life may be a bit trapped, a bit dreary. There might be a lot of sickness and death around. There might be lots of hopes that you had wanted to be fulfilled and are not being fulfilled. Often then we have the thought, surely there's more to life than this. We see all these bright, shiny people and we think, hey, I want some of that. How do we get that? By doing things which are bright and shiny. If you want bright and shiny, you can have it. Possible. Why do you want bright and shiny? Bright and shiny is better than grey and dull. Why? Because it makes me feel good. Who feels good? I feel good. Who is the one who feels good? To know? Me? There's always the point. The ego prefers happiness to sadness. The ego is not stupid. What do you want? I'll take the happiness. Fair enough. But in terms of awareness, happiness and sadness are the same. It's impersonal. It's just stuff. We sit there and the mind's cloudy and then the mind's bright, and then they interchange. They move. Bright becomes cloudy, cloudy becomes bright. Both are simply temporary, because bright in its strong form, it's like a manic state. Neither manic nor depressive is better, just equanimity. One taste, everything with the taste of emptiness. Again, that doesn't mean that you block happiness. You can be with the happiness, but not seeking it, and when it comes, not over-privileging it. Not getting very excited, because excitement is a kind of manic or histrionic over elaboration of a fleeting moment. In all our lives, good things will come and bad things will come. Some days we'll be clear, other days we won't be so clear. If you imagine that when things are clear, you're having a big breakthrough, then when you feel confused and cloudy, it will feel much worse. Just observe, this is how my mind is when it's clear. This is how my mind is when it's sad. Then you start to experience the range of possibilities. And the more you see these possibilities, the more it's possible to manifest them. And we do this anyway. If somebody tells you a very sad story, unless you're very anxiously defended, you won't smile. Your face will become sad. We do this very easily. We align ourselves. Our energy and the energy of the other move together. Of course, we don't want to become as sad as the person who's sad. We have a resonant sadness. We're with them in their sadness, but we are not sad in the way that they are sad. Otherwise, you'd be just in a fusion. So not backing off and avoiding it, feeling contamination, and not merging into it, just staying in contact, being impacted. And Dzogchen is simply building on that, which is the quality of translucence, of letting the world manifest through you. Dzogchen builds on that to help us be present in every situation, however it is. Because this is our life. Our life is not some game plan or some fantasy. It's actually what arrives. And everyone in this room has a different life. And yet, the ground of our life is all the same. The nature of the mind is the same for all beings. It's open, it's empty, it's ungraspable, it's the ground of all phenomena, it's radiant, it's shining. But it shines out in these many different ways. Sometimes we find ourselves feeling not very hopeful, not very confident. And we see someone else who appears to be confident. And we think, I would like to be like them. What is the meaning of that? It means I don't know how to be with my own situation. I'd rather swap my situation for their situation because their situation is better. Now, if we take it that things are as they appear to be, things are substantially real, then it's a very sensible decision. I would like their happiness. They can have my sadness. That would be very good. Makes sense. You have a crappy old car, someone else has a brilliant new shiny car. Wouldn't you like their car? Yes, I would. That makes sense. Who is the one who wants that car? Me. Who is me? You know me. I'm me. Huh? The voice of stupidity is very intelligent. In samsara, there is a particular kind of intelligence. It says, I want good things and I don't want bad things. You ask any child and they'll tell you that's true. You say, here's some homework and here's a bar of chocolate. Which one do you want? It's straightforward. Dzogchen has a different vision of the world from that. Because the problem with that is, although we want chocolate, we often get homework. I still have to do my tax returns. Piles of paper await me and somehow it's not getting done. That's what life is. There's actual things to be done. And even if we do our best to get more chocolate, it doesn't always come. We wanted lint and we got Cadbury's. That's how it is. That's why samsara is difficult. The Buddha said, what is the nature of suffering? Getting what you don't want, not getting what you do want. As soon as you feel, I know who I am, I know what I need, and you set out to get it, you immediately tie yourself into a huge force field of very complex factors which will endlessly sabotage you. So from the point of view of Dzogchen, when we feel frustrated, when we feel irritated, when we feel our life isn't good, the central point is, rather than mobilizing our energy to try to change the external situation, first of all, who is the one who feels blocked, irritated and frustrated? Because if you can follow that line and see the ground awareness which illuminates the narrow one, the constricted one, the irritated one, you find that this is a fruit or a flower growing out of this open ground. If you have a garden, although you may want to have beautiful flowers, you will have, due to the generous bounty of nature, weeds. It is impossible to have a garden without weeds. Weeds are part of nature. We say this is a flower, this is a weed. Both come together. Happiness and sadness come together. So, what do they come from? They come from seeds. The seeds are planted in the same ground. One ground, different kinds of plants. Some we say beautiful flower, others we say ugly weed. The same in our mind. If you focus on the manifestation, we say, this is crap, I don't want to be like this, I've had enough of this. Or we say, this is beautiful, this is really good, I want to hang on to this as long as possible. That's fine, but what is the ground of that experience? Who is the one who is the root experiencer? What is the basic awareness? The naked, uncontrived awareness. That is the ground of all. The kunshi, the basis of every aspect of existence. That is open awareness. So, when we have a difficult time in our lives, there are two main paths. We have the path of deep dharma, which is to stay present with the situation and find ourselves present with that situation in a state of open awareness. Or we take the situation as serious and we try to act on it to turn a bad situation into a good situation. That is the path of samsara. Samsara doesn't mean just bad things. In samsara you also have beautiful villas on Lake Lucerne, or you have beautiful houses in the country in Tuscany with cellars filled with the most delicious wines. You have wonderful pantries full of Parma ham and huge Parmigiano. You can have fantasies of wonderful things. And some people have these. Some people have that. That's their daily life. Perhaps not here in Macclesfield.
James, I'll ask you, do you not think that you have to deal with circumstances? If, for example, you're being bullied at work, should you just stay present with that situation? Or should you not tackle it according to the system provided, for example?
For example, okay, but what I'm saying, it's the non-duality of these two approaches. Because the samsara line is you feel hassled and you respond. The Dzogchen approach is, who is the one who is being hassled? Into the openness and then respond. The response is still going to come, but instead of responding with this heated up feeling, because especially for most of us, we don't have a hair trigger. Most of us are a bit slow. So we've been ground for a while. The irritation's been there for a while, so it's heated up quite a lot. And by the time we speak, we're often speaking in a moment that's not very wise and not very clear. And then whack. And then other people are shocked because we've shown ourselves as compliant and friendly, and now suddenly we're being some nasty bitch from hell. And that can lead to a lot of problems. So it's not that you shouldn't respond, but if you're spacious and you can feel, who is this oppressor? And you can see immediately, this is the energy of the Dharmakaya manifesting as an arsehole. then you have a bit of freedom of operation in that. Because if you think only, just fuck off and die, I've had enough of you. Huh? If you get into that thing, it's very, very solid. Subject and object are now real and separate, and that's only samsara. It's unlikely that you'll get a good outcome from that. But if you're spacious, and you can see the spaciousness in the other person, which is hidden by the way they're swirling in their anxious control or their self-indulgence, whatever it is, you can think, oh, that's a manifestation of the 5 poisons. Now, I need to work with the 5 poisons. So how will I do that? From this state of awareness, and you find a way. Not to be pinned.
Do you ever get the feeling that you're driving your employer's monkey?
No.
I used to have an employer like this, who used to just come on duty and see me. And the telephone used to go up and down on the desk because she hated me so much because I was calm and she was the swirling one.
Mm.
And it leads to all sorts of manifestations of energy.
You know, maybe I'm not making this sufficiently clear. The calmness is the state of the relaxed open mind. You can manifest in any way. All these wrathful deities are the energy of the Dharmakaya. It doesn't mean that you have to put up with shit from people. It means when you arise towards the situation, one ground, 2 paths. One path is, don't you fuck with me. Are you speaking to me? Oh, fuck you. It's very solid. Pow! That way leads to real difficulty because there's a lot of grinding and you're in the matrix of karma. It will only lead to negative results.
Well, I accepted this as my karma and I stayed there until she retired because I thought this was part of my lesson.
I don't know that people like that have any lessons to teach us.
So you have one to learn.
Yeah. And the question is, who is the one who's going to learn the lesson? Because if it's in our ego, then we probably learn a rather diminished thing. We can become a bit paranoid, a bit wary, and we think never again, and so on. And these are all fixed positions. And the key aspect of Dzogchen is fixed positions don't help us. Each situation in life is new and fresh. So we have to learn to cook freshly into that situation.
So you're suggesting that we move all the time to get to new situations?
No, I'm suggesting that everything moves anyway, and if we build up an image in our mind, my boss is a bitch, then every time I see her, I'm going to feel agitated because now I'm stuck with this bitch.
That's how she felt about me.
Yeah, so then you get a completely locked situation. The fact is, I've come to Macclesfield a few times, and I've come into this particular room a few times, and each time it's different. There's some shift in the mood that's around, or the people who are involved or not so involved. Everything's changing all the time. So what one can do through planning is not all that much, because when you get to the concrete situation, it's different. Now, if you hold in your mind a negative feeling about a bullying boss, you've already prefigured what the situation will be. There's a foreclosure in your mind because your expectation and your intention and planning, even if it's good-hearted Mahayana, doing a bit of Tonglen or something, exchanging self and other, it's still a reading of a situation from an abstract level in your head rather than what's immediately there. Because it may well be that in the movement of the other person's face, in their posture or their gesture, there is some sign that something is different, because in their life many things will be happening. They are not a thing, they are a movement of energy. So if you can find that out of being open, often things can shift. That would be the part of Dzogchen. This third level of energy that I was describing before, like the ray of light going through a crystal and refracting out, means in each moment precisely we come into the world. And we don't know what the world will be because it changes. So whenever we build up a picture in our mind, a prejudice, a judgment that's there before the event, we are actually doing a violence to our own existence, because the world is not like that and we are not like that. This is why self-knowledge is a great poison. The more you know about yourself, the more constipated you become. Because you then think, this is how I am. But of course, there's always possibilities of becoming in different ways. So what Garab Dorje is suggesting is the central point: stay with the ongoing integration of every circumstance, and don't define yourself through the quality of your circumstances. Now, most of the time we have a belief, if I try hard, life will get better. So we do the practice and life doesn't get better, then we think the practice is crap or I'm crap. There are many causes for why some people have easy, healthy, happy lives and other people have difficult lives. People who have difficult lives are not bad. People who have happy, easy lives are not wonderful. In another life, the circumstances will change. This is just a tiny little cross-section, a moment in the infinity of time. Don't take it too seriously. It's an illusion, like the reflection of the moon on water. Be present in yourself and respond into the circumstances moment by moment. Yeah.
I read a lot of stories about some of these masters who express their spontaneity in very wrathful ways towards students. Some that are living on a mountainside who are, throw stones at incoming disciples to ward them off, or just act in what seem to be maybe crazy or inconsiderate ways, and maybe there's a way in which we think we should be relaxed and calm, when in fact the real spontaneous action is to express an angry state.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say about this? The way in which energy can manifest spontaneously, and your being in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
without thinking or intending to be harmful, but acting in a way that might be angry or sad or emotional, and is that not also a part of the expression of the Dharmakaya state? Or should
Mm-hmm.
we relax that and dissolve that emotion, and is the goal to be in a completely even equanimous state?
Well, as my teacher would always say, don't mix your shit with your food. You have to keep clarifying what we're talking about here. What is calm and clear is this unborn Dharmakaya. It's not that I have to be calm and clear. It's not I am trying to control myself to calm myself down. The open mind state is always calm. Nobody would say it's angry. There are wrathful forms of the Dharmakaya, but they are arising from a calm, open state. So they manifest from that. Calmness is at the heart of everything. If your mind is not calm and clear like the clear blue sky, then all phenomena can't be liberated. They won't be liberated. And that will mean then when you move towards other beings, you'll be acting from a nexus of your own undigested karma, which means that your spontaneity will be defiled and you'll be doing a number. And there are people who do a number. There's a famous teacher in Bhutan who is always angry. Well, if somebody's always angry, what's that? He's angry. Why would he be always angry? More to life than that.
But is there a way to express anger where there's not attachment to it and there's not self-identification
Of course.
with the energy, and that it's just it's of the same quality, or so you could say?
Of course.
But that there's not I mean, I guess that's what I'm getting at. Is it possible then to be in a clear and open way, and not in a constricted way, and still express emotion or feeling?
Of course. Of course. The same, exactly the issue about the boss. If your boss is persecuting you, if you're very clear who is the one who is being persecuted, you can remain calm and clear. As soon as you're calm and clear, you like the state of the mirror. The mirror shows everything as a reflection. So, we look in the mirror to see our face. The mirror shows things quite clearly. Now you see the situation clearly. So what will I do? Well, you can go to human resource department. You can keep a little dossier of things they say. You can try to set it up so that the person makes their angry comment in front of a third party. There are all sorts of ways you can set people up to stab them. You know, in the tantric tradition, you make a little triangular wooden box and you put a nail through them. You can do that in a business situation as well. Box someone into a corner and shaft them. Yeah, there's no reason why you shouldn't do that if you understand everything is emptiness, and if I concretize it, I will have a karmic consequence. If I can just briefly remind you, karma is based on a 4-stage process. The first stage is the ji, or the basis, which means taking subject and object as separate and real. Following that, there is an intention or a thought. Following that, there is an action, and following that, there is satisfaction with the consequence. So, my boss is awful. I hate my boss. There's a concretized situation. There is an object, this person, my boss, and subject, me. I feel persecuted by them, and my responding feeling is anger. What's my intention? To free myself from this oppression. That could be done through many flavors, with revenge, with a desire to annihilate them, with a desire to be moved to another department, or get them moved to another department, or to get them just to change their behavior. You decide on a plan and you bring it into action. You call a meeting, you make a grievance, you carry that through. Afterwards, they get sacked or they get moved away, and you think, that was good. Got her. Well done. So now you think it is a good thing that I successfully put a squeeze on that person. That's a good outcome. From the level of survival in office politics, it's a very good outcome. From the level of production of karma, you've created quite a lot. From the level of dharma practice, total shit. What do you want? In order to practice the dharma, first is this basis, emptiness. If it's emptiness, self, other, and the relation between them are all empty, moving in space. Within that, there is the coloration of the particular moment, which is to say, this person, under the power of stupidity, behaves in ways which are oppressive to themselves and to others. With compassion, I will stop them in their tracks. They are helping me by letting me see that my anger could become solid and form an ego base for hostile revenge. Liberating that, how will I behave? Then nobody can say from the outside how to behave. That will depend on the situation. But the big difference is the first point. If something is solidly real, you're already in the realm of the accumulation of cause and effect. No matter whether your action is very skillful or not skillful, because it's reified, it's made solid and objectified, it will weave endless links for you. So these stories of great masters, good or bad, who knows? Only they can see their own mind. It's easy to cheat yourself. So that's why we say in Dzogchen there is no particular kind of behavior that's proposed. If you follow the Theravadan path, you have many rules and regulations. You vow not to kill, not to have sex, maybe at all, or under certain conditions, not to take intoxicating substances, not to steal, not to lie, and so on. Many, many rules. In the Mahayana tradition, you take the bodhisattva vow and you develop the wisdom of emptiness in order to fulfill the bodhisattva vow. In the tantric tradition, there are many different organizations of vows which you learn following an initiation. And you have to follow these, and they determine your behavior. There are certain things that you have to do and certain things that you mustn't do. In Dzogchen, there is no particular direction to behavior. The only thing that's really required is that you are aware and present. And if you are aware and present, you will not do bad things. It's not possible to do bad things if you're present. It just doesn't happen.
When you say the adoption is to my understanding, because I've been studying Buddhism for some time, in the relationship with the Mahayana, to achieve the emptiness or the emphasizing of love and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get anything in the teaching practice until now. Just going to emphasize on love and compassion or the emptiness. So, where is this relating?
Right. That's a very good question.
Could you summarize it for us?
Hmm?
Could you summarize the question for us?
The question is that generally speaking, in the Mahayana tradition, there's a lot of emphasis on compassion and love, particularly in relation to wisdom. That is often compared to the two wings of a bird, and you need both to attain enlightenment. But in Dzogchen, there's not so much focus on love and compassion. And so the question, why is that? Well, we develop love and compassion as a practice, as an antidote to our self-referential behavior. That we have a sense of self, an individual entity, we can say an I, a me, a dat, and we have an attachment to that, a dzimpa, a holding on to it. So this is something precious, and this becomes a sealed ball, me first, and if there's any left, you can have something, but me first. This is the usual way of behaving. So in Mahayana Buddhism, we try to turn this around and we say, you first, and if there's any left, I'll take that. May you gain enlightenment first, and I'll come after. And so out of that, we develop practices like, I give you all my happiness, I take all your pain. And we do that through the integration of the loving heart in emptiness. In Dzogchen, there is not so much emphasis on that, because this would be seen as a method. If you integrate into this natural open state, because it has no boundary and has no dualistic separation between self and other, the welfare of others and the welfare of yourself occur at the same time. So in that sense, when they talk of compassion, they talk of three different aspects of compassion. One is a compassion with an intention to help all sentient beings as if they were your mother and father. And that goes with developing positive thoughts and preparing the way and looking at your selfishness. And the second is the form of compassion, which is like actually being on the journey, developing the compassion in a way through doing your puja, doing your prayers, actively really bringing manifest benefit into the world, maybe through visualizing rays of light going out to all beings, and on a very external, practical level, being kind, putting other people first. But there is also a third kind of compassion. In Tibetan it's called Migme Ninje. Migme Ninje, Migpa means to take an object, to reify, to see something as solid. Mepa means not. So this is the compassion where there is no real object. And even in the Mahayana Sutras, in the Dorje Chopa, in the Vajra Jedika, the diamond cutting sutra, which is in the Prajnaparamita, it says the bodhisattva who wants to save sentient beings has already broken his vows. That is to say, if you think sentient beings are strongly real and they really, really suffer and you really want to help them, you're not a bodhisattva. Because all sentient beings from the very beginning have been empty. And the bodhisattva from the very beginning has been empty. And the movement of compassion has been empty. So we save sentient beings in the manner of a dream. Buddhism is unlikely to give rise to Médecins Sans Frontières or Oxfam, with endless pictures of little children with tears coming down their face. Oh my God, oh, this is not helpful. Anyone can cry. Anyone can cry. Crying's tuppence. Read some funny novel and you can cry. Weepy movies. Crying is free. Saving beings, according to Buddhism, means awakening to your own nature. Your nature is emptiness. So love and compassion and emptiness have to be integrated together. All holding hands in a circle and saying, may everyone be happy, that makes us feel good. But it doesn't necessarily change anything. To really help beings doesn't mean feeding them, clothing them, being kind to them. It means helping them wake up. This is the essence of Mahayana Buddhism. This is where Buddhism is different from all other religions. All other religions say, maybe worship God, that's Buddhism doesn't do that too much, but essentially they say, be a nice person, be kind. If you go to a mosque, outside there are always beggars, because one of the 5 pillars of Islam is to give donations to poor people, to feed the poor. Hinduism has plenty of that. Sikhs in their Gurdwaras always have free food. You can turn up, you always get free food. Feeding people is a good idea. Being kind to people is a good idea. But it doesn't bring liberation. Niceness is not enough.
I'd rather not see people starve while you're waiting for liberation.
Yeah, you can do both at the same time. But when you feed people, you can feed them with an understanding of awareness. It's not either or.
I've never seen inside the Hindu temples feeding with awareness. I only see people getting food and feeling satisfied. I'm not aware of awareness.
Well, that would be terrible. I've lived in many Hindu ashrams, and you know, you have to have the people serving the food should have some awareness. Everybody's sitting there, and they're usually singing. Govinda Jai Jai Gaurama Jai Jai Govinda Jai Jai Gaurama Jai Jai. Like that. It's very nice, and everybody clapping. Fat guru sitting at the front, putting it in. If fat guru's just thinking, which one of these lovely ladies do I want to fuck? That's not very good. Sometimes the fat guru's doing that.
If you're a Buddhist and you're waiting to be enlightened,
Yeah.
when is the trigger to start you doing the feeding?
No, your feeding is part of the path. I mean, what I've been saying has been a complete waste of time. I don't think I'm saying that you should, meditation will make you unkind and ungenerous. If a meditation practice gives you more connection with other people, unpleasant as many people are, it wouldn't make you feel a lot of hatred towards them. Non-duality means there is no separation, no boundary wall between me and another. Therefore, I'm not defending myself against them, and I will do what I can to help them. Feeding people is absolutely fine. But if you're worrying all the time about how to feed people, for example, you can volunteer for a Christmas soup kitchen. Very often these places are quite angry places because a lot of people to feed, and and the gas hasn't arrived. My God, what are we going to do? And everyone's agitated and worried in order to help people. That's not necessary. Emptiness and compassion are not two separate things. The beings to be saved do not truly exist. That is not the same as nihilism. It doesn't mean they don't exist at all, but it doesn't mean they strongly exist. It is the middle way. The middle way. So, Compassion in the middle way is warmth and care and compassion in the manner of a dream. This is very difficult for us to understand because we think real compassion requires suffering. Suffering on the part of the noble people who do it. The fantasy of the young nurse staying awake all night, Florence Nightingale, Médecins Sans Frontières, they're in the jungle, the leeches are on them, but they're doing the operation. I think, God, these heroes, wonderful people. And they are wonderful, but they're operating inside the will to power. Everything is real. I have to do this. This is special. This is very important. From a Dharma point of view, it's not quite like that.
Lao Tzu said, true kindness acts without kind thoughts.
Could be. I think you can have kind thoughts as well. Kind thoughts are not wrong. The main thing is that the kind thought itself is empty.
Yeah. There doesn't have to be that I am going to do good.
Yeah. Doesn't have to. So, continuing in the way, this third point of Garab Dorje, means that, yes, we can see there are many things in the world to do, like running soup kitchens. Some Buddhist centers, like the Kajupas, they have Rokpa, which means friend or helper. Then that's a nice thing to do. But we already have the Salvation Army. Another soup kitchen? Oh yeah, why not? There are always hungry people. It's maybe not the most important thing to do. You can meditate and help people. How to integrate meditation into helping people. Now, if your meditation involves you going wara 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 wara, it is quite difficult to help someone. Would you like some soup? Wara 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 wara. Hung hung hung. I've put some mantras in your soup so it's better for you. I don't want mantras in my fucking soup. I want Christian soup. I'm a Christian. This is a Christian country. Huh? So, how are you going to bring your practice into compassion? It has to be a practice which doesn't have a strong flavor. It's not going to be chilies. It's not going to be pepper. It's just something quite bland, invisible, emptiness. In the state of emptiness, this action is occurring. Emptiness will integrate with everything because it's not a thing. It has no point of resistance to any form at all. Any position you take up will have a resistance. You cannot, in mathematics, you can't integrate every number. We have integers, numbers which run through, and others which block. In the same way, when you have shapes and forms, some fit and some don't fit. The thing about emptiness is it has no shape. It has no color, no form. Therefore, it fits everything. When we understand that, continuing in the state of awareness, inseparable from emptiness, whatever is required can be done. So, when we hear of some brilliant new thing that's being done, yes, it's wonderful, but can we move towards it in a state of awareness? Being excited is not a good idea. People want enthusiasm. Enthusiasm means entheos. It means the God, the deity comes into you. And it comes from the cult of Dionysus, where people were taken over in an ecstasis. They were taken out of themselves into ecstasy, transformed. This is not the practice. The practice is integrating everything into your own state. It's not very exciting. It's not manic. It's absolutely profound and connective to every situation. As it says in the basic text, if you find a needle on the road, don't celebrate. If a bottle of beer goes sour, don't cry. Ups and downs, up and down. Hopes and fears all the time. People, watching the Olympic Games. Hooray! We won! What did we win? What? All this excitement for nothing. Obama! $600 million to bring Mr. Obama. Why? What? This won't change very much at all. It's very important to see the seductions of manic excitement, and also the fear of depression and confusion and darkness. If the world economic situation gets worse, hopes and fears will be moving in great cascades. Oh my God, what now? Oh my, how will we manage? How will we cope? We don't know how we'll cope. Let's see what the situation is. But how? You don't. What's the how? 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 It's ridiculous. Of course, that's what we do. We get impacted and upset. Upset is not helpful. How not to be upset? In the practice. That doesn't mean not being touched. Of course you are touched, but the movement is the movement of energy, because there are two dimensions, stillness and movement. Stillness and movement from the very beginning are inseparable. This is Dorje Chang, the founding great Buddha of this Kajupa lineage. He's like this, because form and emptiness are inseparable. Means it's okay. Basically, it's okay. Whatever comes, comes. Whatever goes, goes. Awareness is still here. But if you build your house on sand, if you construct your world according to the passing show, to Vanity Fair, to the current excitements, the hopes and the fears, you're just in this turbulent ocean of samsara, wave after wave after wave. And life will tumble on like that. People who aim to follow the dharma choose a different path. Where am I? Who is the one who is feeling sad? Who is the one who is excited? Who is the one who is hopeful? Stay present with the one who is having that experience. Don't fall into the hope. Don't fall into the fear. Don't block the fear. Don't push it away. The fear is there and you are here. They are not the same. There you have the optimal conditions for responding with awareness. Yeah.
Do you think there's a danger of people trying to do this practice alienating themselves from their experience by sort of taking on a sort of calm position, instead of being afraid of sort of falling into experience, actually protecting themselves from being touched by it?
It could happen. That would be a sign of not meditating well. Because calmness is not a position. Calmness is a quality of the unborn nature. So I don't have to be calm. Calmness is what there is if you're not caught up in turbulence. It's not that I've got the basic ingredients, now I can make a Victoria sponge or a fruit cake. It's not like that. It's if I stop doing this, that's what's there. If I take my attention away from where it habitually goes, this is what's there. One is a construct, a whole pattern of constructions, and the other is an unconstructed, uncompounded. So in that sense, it's not a position. If you adopt a calm position, like doing mindfulness walking, then that is indeed a retreat from the world. That is holding on to an intentional stance, which is very vulnerable to the impingement of something else. Because if somebody is walking very mindfully, then they almost need security guards around them, because they're in this altered state. They're not in the world. So it's how to feel the impact, but not be the one who feels the impact. This is why we have this image. The mirror shows the reflection. It doesn't block it. But the mirror is not the reflection. But the mirror is not different from the reflection. This is very unusual. This is not our normal experience. Because usually it's one thing or another. It's either or. Either I'm in it or I'm out of it. And if I'm out of it, I'm not in it. And if I'm in it, I'm not out of it. Non-duality is different. And only doing the practice will give us that direct experience. Any last thoughts before we move towards a final meditation? This teaching is in the tradition called extraordinary. It's not something you can find in any shop. in Tibet, in many monasteries, people would have to have meditated for many, many years and studied many, many things before they heard one word of this. And in some ways, this Tibetan tradition is very wise. Because like Jesus said, don't cast pearls before swine. No, don't take that personally. So, and of course in the Wheel of Life the pig stands for ignorance. So usually people would say you have to do a lot of preliminary practice first of all in order to become more fresh and more able to understand this. But from the tradition of my teacher, he said first of all you should always give people a chance to see and to recognize directly. And of course all kinds of veils and obscurations come up when we do that. Recognizing these, we start to work with our obscurations. If you try to remove the obscurations before you get to a point of clarity so you can understand this, life will be gone. Our lives are very busy. What we have is a chance to attend to the central instruction here, and when you can, do the other practices. Understand the Mahayana path, study the Shantideva's path of a bodhisattva, reflect on your own limitations, develop the paramitas. These are all good things to do. It's not an either or. What we're saying is you run them simultaneously. Rather than doing a kind of stages of a graded path, we run them at the same time. But it's very important to learn all these different paths and to observe yourself what happens when you develop the different kinds of intention. If you do a puja with Tara or Chenrezi and then you do one with Vajrakilaya, what's the difference? What happens to your body? What happens to your breath? What happens to your dreams, your thoughts? This is all part of the path. It's not either or. But it's very important to see what the function of the different kinds of practice is. You know, Mahayana Buddhism is not designed to make good people. Buddhism is not a humanistic focus. Some people see it as a kind of humanistic non-religion religion. But Buddhism doesn't say human beings are the best. It says that awakened state is the best, and awakened state is not in the wheel of samsara, which means there is more to life than we know. Our own thoughts, memories and experiences are not the limit of existence. And when we do the practice and we enter into a state where we can see the construction of everyday identity, it's almost like we take an X-ray of our own existence and we see it in action. Then we see how we tie ourselves in knots and how the knots start to come free. And that then, instead of protecting ourselves against that, we see that our energy can play with other people's energy. And compassion is the revelation of the movement of energy in a non-dual sphere with other people. And that's a wonderful thing to experience. Makes life quite light and easy, even though there are many problems. Okay, shall we do a final sitting? drowa chicha malupa dei sala kepashu. So, we come to the end of our brief time together, and I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me, especially Gordon and his hospitality, which is great, and Charles doing the recording, and of course many people involved in helping the organization run along. So that's a great thing. It's very easy for me. I just arrive and then go, and there's all sorts of other things going on behind the scenes. So I hope the practice is useful to you, and it opens up something good in your lives. And perhaps we meet again. Bye.
Thank you.